Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the sneaky Senate amnesty. Author Mary Grabar joins me to talk about why kids hate America, and Democrats flailing while Trump is connecting, and finally, the blue wave, but why? And I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. A lot of us feel a little bit comfortable in Washington because we at least have the Republican, barely, but the Republican control of the Senate, even though the House is controlled by the Democrats and obviously President Trump Republican in the White House. So you think probably too many bad things couldn't get through in Washington because after all, the Senate is there, along with President Trump, ultimately to stop bad legislation. But I want to tell you about something that fortunately came to the attention of Daniel Horowitz, and we've quoted him, we've had him on the show before. He's an author at Conservative Review, and he's very connected to lots of people in Capitol Hill, as is Congressman Chip Roy, the extremely wonderful member of Congress in his first term from the state of Texas. Both of them were hearing from Senate staffers they know that the United States Senate very quietly and surreptitiously is working on an amnesty bill, and it's Republicans working on an amnesty bill. Main villain, Senator Thom Tillis, talked about him before. He's from North Carolina. He's a liberal Republican, and he's essentially working on an amnesty bill that springs off of a bill that the House passed. Let me tell you what is in the House bill first, and then we'll go back to the Senate. In this House bill, December 11th, passed the U.S. House December 11th, and it was described as Orwellian name, Farm Workforce Modernization Act. Well, that sounds nice. You know, maybe you're going to modernize the workforce. Here's what they're doing. In plain English, it grants amnesty to every illegal alien in this country who claims to have worked at least part-time for agriculture. It creates an unlimited agriculture guest worker program for the future to bring in millions of low-skilled workers. Obviously, this is something the Democrat Party would like. All they want to do is bring in more and more immigration, especially low-skilled, unskilled, because they view these people as potential Democrat voters. But we now have in the Senate a bill being floated by, and actually developed by Thom Tillis. Another one I found actually surprising, but maybe I shouldn't have been, James Lankford of Oklahoma, and our favorite Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. They are working on this bill as of yesterday in the Senate in an effort, what they're working on is actually to get President Trump's approval. They want to work Trump on the idea that this would be a great thing for you to pass an election year. This is really great. You know, you'll help get voters. I mean to tell you, folks, I hope President Trump has advisors around him to tell him how ill-advised this would be in an election year to pass a partial amnesty. I also want to draw your attention to the brilliant letter written to the Senate by Congressman Chip Roy. It's up at my website, americacanwetalk.org. You go to that homepage, and under the caption shows drop-down list of links. I linked his letter, Chip Roy's letter, sent directly to the Senate Judiciary Committee and its chairman, as you likely know, Lindsey Graham, basically laying out, we have a huge issue with immigration. We have many, many aspects of the immigration problem that must be fixed. Giving amnesty to a bunch of people, including, understand, people who say they have worked at some point ever in agriculture. They're here illegally. They have no legal right to be here, but this would give them all amnesty. And this is, I mean, it sounds crazy. It sounds like something you'd hear made up and they think, no, the Republicans wouldn't be doing that. But it's gone so far in the efforts that actually they've already had a meeting with Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue trying to get him on board, encouraging him to say, this is a great idea. We need agricultural workers. Let's just pass this bill. We're just modernizing the agriculture system. And notably did not have anyone in attendance at that meeting from the Homeland Security Department. So they're trying to angle and get this thing pushed down the road, get President Trump on board. But Chip Roy's letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee basically lays out, we have many immigration problems, no reason to give what is going to turn out to be a massive amnesty. without fixing all the other problems we have not fixed, such as securing the border, finishing the wall, clarifying or, in fact, probably improving our refugee standards, the federal law that decides what categories of people can apply, what you have to prove if you want to become a refugee officially in America. So Chip Roy was really great, brought it out. He blasted it out on Facebook, made a very public opposition to it. I hope a little bit tripping up the Senate surreptitious effort by the Republicans to push this bill while no one's paying attention. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. As I mentioned at the start of our show, we have a guest joining us. She's in studio. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to talk about her book. This is her book, and I'm always hoping this is not showing backwards. I think this is right. This is her book. It is called Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America. The author is Mary Grabar, and she is with the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. I just love the name of that group. His name is really good. And actually, I linked on our website also, AmericanCanWeTalk.org. On the list of links under the show, I listed their page where they tell you the principles that their organization is dedicated to. But she wrote this book to talk about what American students have been learning in public schools and private schools about American history because of one book, this book, Debunking Howard Zinn. She, Mary Grabar, in studio with me today. She is with the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. I'm going to ask her. She was born in Slovenia. We'll find out how long she lived there, which was still part of communist Yugoslavia. Rather amazing. Grew up in Rochester, New York. She has a PhD in English from the University of Georgia. She taught at a number of colleges and universities in Georgia until 2013. And while teaching, she wrote widely on political, cultural, and educational topics. And in 2014, she moved to Clinton, New York, and became a resident fellow at the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. Dr. Grabar, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you wrote this book. I will just tell you before we came on air what I was telling you, and then have you answer a lot of questions about it. I've got a bunch of questions.
Okay.
But to start with, I feel like in this political environment, I think many Americans were shocked, for example, to see young people turning against something as seemingly innocuous as a Christopher Columbus statue and wanting to end celebration of Christopher Columbus Day and tearing down statues. How many young people were lured into socialism and are on board with Bernie Sanders? And, you know, you look at it, you think, where did they get these crazy ideas? Herein is the problem. So to start with, tell us a little bit about Howard Zinn's book that you wrote this book to critique his book. But tell us about his book.
Okay, well, The People's History of the United States was first published in 1980. It's been in continuous publication since, and it sells more books each year than it did the year before, which is a publishing phenomenon. It's still making incredible amount of money for his estate. Howard Zinn has been dead for 10 years. That I would estimate that there are over 3 million copies sold. It's used as a textbook. There are dozens of spin-off products, People's History of the Civil War, People's History of American Empire. There's a Young People's History of the United States. I've come across textbooks for middle school and elementary school students that quote extensively from Howard Zinn and present him as a respected historian. He has entered the popular culture, movies, rock bands, praise
right,
him.
Rock bands?
Yeah. Pearl Jam, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If they're still around, I don't know.
So he wrote this book, and it actually was The People's History of America. That's the title?
Of the United States.
The United States. And it's a textbook kids read. And then in addition, you were telling me, I want to have you share this with our listeners before we dive into some of the horrible things kids have been learning in this. But the public school testing, college preparatory or college exam testing, is catering to or based on what he's been teaching. How did that ever happen?
Well, under the Obama administration, under his Department of Education, the Advanced Placement U.S. History standards were revised. So advanced placement courses are those that students can take in high school for college credit. And if they pass the exam, they get college credit for it. So when they were revised to the far, far left, Howard Zinn's book fit the bill perfectly. And so whereas in the past his book was snuck in by teachers photocopying pages, now it's openly used. So any school that's offering advanced placement U.S. history is likely to use his book. Catholic schools do, Christian schools do, because that almost guarantees that the student will pass that test. And of course, those who take advanced placement U.S. history may not take any more history at all in college.
So they're left with a perception of American history based on what Howard Zinn told them. So let's talk about why Howard Zinn's book is so bad. Very near the beginning, I thought I had a sticky on this page, but I don't. But somewhere near the beginning, you were talking about him and his description of the Declaration of Independence and his criticism of the Declaration of Independence, essentially saying, how could you say that you have a country dedicated to all men created equal if they had unequal wealth? Right? Wasn't that his argument?
Yes, which is basically a Marxist argument, and it's a straw man. It's a logical fallacy because and of course Madison addressed that in the Federalist Papers about we don't want to have such a wicked project as distributing wealth because you can never do that, and of course we know through history what has happened when people have proposed doing that, right? So he presents this notion to students, and they sit there and they think, yeah, well, maybe things aren't fair. And so right back to the founding, Zinn presents this country as being unjust, as being founded on principles of, the wealthy and the greedy getting their share, keeping the oppressed down, using the middle class as a buffer to keep the lower classes quiet. And he thinks that this is, some work of evil genius on the part of the founding fathers.
Well, I have to say, I have in the show, we're just met today, so you don't know anything about my show, but my show is entirely dedicated to preserving this country and to talking about the founding ideas of America and how they're what made America great. And people in my generation, and we have 3 kids who are young adults, and people in my generation, our generation, really, they nod along when I say these things. They, yeah, that's right. They're the most extraordinary. I go through the ideas and the beauty of the Declaration of Independence and the structure of government, the Constitution, and all of that. I mean, I learned a little bit, I guess, of that in school, and I studied American history in college. I majored in political science, but I loved American history. But no, I mean, even though we had kind of leftist professors then, no one was really saying the very existence of America, the founding premise, was evil, was wrong. But that is really what kids have been reading in his book.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back even farther to Christopher Columbus. So the conclusion that they come up with once they finish the book, not even before they finish the book, is that, this country can't be reformed. Its premises are flawed. It needs to be overthrown. And always on the horizon, Zinn is showing socialism. That would solve the problems.
Oh, he gets around to communism. I'm right. He's very much he's an anti-capitalist.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes,
and that notion of anti-capitalism. I mean, then coming forward to where we are today, we have Bernie Sanders. He's way out ahead in the presidential race on the Democrat side.
Yeah.
And I always say he's the most honest Democrat running because at least he says, yeah, I'm a socialist and I would happily redistribute wealth and I will take away the wealth of the rich and I will create government collectivized control over pretty much everything. At least he's honest. I think most of the Democrat Party is somewhere in his ballpark. But you can see where his popularity with young people came from. I mean, if millions of kids went through public school, and this is what their perception is of America.
Yeah, well, Howard Zinn presents capitalism as the cause of racism, as the cause of poverty, of suffering, and oppression. And so if you're a tender-hearted young person and you read this stuff and you read about the suffering, which he, of course, presents in a falsely by falsifying the evidence, you naturally say, wow, the poor people who've been oppressed, we need to get rid of the system to stop the suffering.
We need Bernie's revolution.
Yeah.
He's talking very openly now, this is a revolution.
Yeah, and they're drawn to him. They're zealots for him. I mean, it's really amazing, because when I look at Bernie, he is a scary person. I mean, an angry, fist shaking, humorless, redistributor, but I don't understand the appeal, I mean, you can sort of understand a John F. Kennedy appeal to young people, but a Bernie Sanders,
Oh, I know. I mean, it's his ideas. I mean, he's all the things the left claims to hate. He's an old, rich, white guy.
That's right.
And yet he's their contender. So I did find the page. Yeah, I think that is an amazing thing. If you can't get on board to start with the idea of America, the Declaration of Independence, we all, created by God, we all have equal rights. If you think that should mean equal wealth, then you already don't understand what America's all about.
Right.
And yet that's where he starts off, very early on in your book. So I guess the next one I was going to hit, you talked about race, and I think this is the most, you have a chapter called America the Racist. This is another thing that I think is so observable in modern political activities and rallies and speeches, is this underlying message, and it really wasn't present 20 years ago in America. I mean, there were things that occurred that were wrong. We've never been free of racism ever. No country ever has been.
That's right.
But the picture of America as deeply racist, and as founded on racism, and as incurably racist, and what is the argument of the left is, because America is so terrible, everyone vote for us and we're going to fix it all somehow. But he ties the argument about race to socialism, or to anti-capitalism, to being anti-capitalist. Can you explain that?
Well, he basically says that there was no other place in the world where slavery was as cruel as in the United States. And the reason he said he gives for being the cruelest is because of the profit motive. And which is entirely false. And I use a lot of statistics and comparisons to slavery in the rest of the world, which of course slavery's been around since the beginning of time. He doesn't say that, but he presents America as being uniquely racist, that it's somehow in our bones and in
our very national identity.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, right.
It's so harsh and it's so cruel, and it's really appealing to young people, to the most, and especially the most vulnerable people. If you aren't particularly engaged in the world and what you're being told by your Zinn textbook in high school, and then by Bernie Sanders and other Democrat leaders, is that this is what this country is all about. No wonder there's a sense of alienation, division, racial tension. Mm-hmm. And I have, in many, many ways on this show, numerous times tried to rebut that, talk about no country's perfect, America's not perfect, but we have a great record in our own country of overcoming. We decided we're not going to have slavery continue. We removed slavery through the Civil War. We Americans came together. We had the removal of the laws that permitted segregation or compelled segregation. We
right.
All of those things. We've taken so many steps, and I would say because of the goodness of the American heart and spirit.
Oh, absolutely. Right from the from the founding, there are people who oppose slavery. There's always been this big debate. Yeah, I mean, it has always been there, and we have been at the forefront. I mean, one of the things I do in my book is I compare, what was going on in the debates that were being held in the 1840s when the abolitionist movement was in full force. You had the evangelicals, the Christians, organizing, and a British diplomat asked the Sultan of Morocco, he said, well, what are you going to be doing about abolishing slavery? And the Sultan said, he was just scratching his head. It's like, why would you even think of such a thing as abolishing slavery? It wasn't even in their conceptual universe. But this idea that all men are created equal was there, prodding consciences, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And so we lived up to that ideal. Ultimately, it was made right. And it was a very complicated thing to do at the time. But of course, Zinn is, a very simplistic, communist writer who wants to divide people into good and evil. And of course, those who are evil are the capitalists. And like every communist, he wants to start a civil war among the races.
Oh, it is so devastating and so alarming and so upsetting. Actually, one point I want to make sure to make clear, you did read his book, you're writing your book in response to his, but you really do a great and scholarly job of pointing out not just where he's inaccurate, but the many things, historical facts, context that he leaves out, because to make his points, he has to ignore history. He has to ignore facts. He has to ignore what you were just describing a moment ago, that their slavery has existed since time began. You mentioned slavery existed in Africa. I mean, sure. African native tribes enslaving other African native tribes.
Right, exactly. So he ignores a major part of history, and so he presents only one side of it. He also takes quotations out of context. He leaves out essential information. So he claims to be quoting someone. So, if I were to say, I do not like this dish that you served me, and if you left out the word not, right, that would have he does stuff like that.
Clearly intentional misleading. Yeah.
Intentional. Yeah, Howard Zinn knew exactly what he was doing. He had a PhD and he wrote a good dissertation on Fiorello LaGuardia, his congressional career, and he turned it into a book. And he knew what he had to do in terms of doing the original research, primary sources, and he knew what he was doing was manipulating history and his sources.
Oh, it's just pure evil. I'm going to go on to other topics he hits, because I have to tell you, my very fine friends listening to the show, I'm going to go back and find out if my kids had this book in school. I don't think so, but I feel like my eyes were opened, recognizing, I've thought for so long, how could there be such antagonism in America? With this country, we've done so much good in trying to improve race relations and improve equality, improve opportunity, and improve things that weren't right about our society. I mean, we didn't have, irrelevant to this, but we didn't have, when the country was founded in the Constitution, women couldn't vote. That's another one. We worked it through. We corrected what was wrong. And I just think there's the level of evil when you write this, you publish this in 1980, and you look at the history of America, and your conclusion is evil from the outset. Pretty much everything about America is to be criticized, maligned. You're really just saying, I hate the idea of America.
Well, yeah, Howard Zinn was a one-time member of the Communist Party from about 1948 to 1953, and that's on the evaluation of his FBI files by a historian named Ron Radash, who was also a one-time, briefly, Communist Party member. And so what Howard Zinn does is he follows the communist playbook. And what I did is I looked at his book side by side with a book published in 1951 by William Z. Foster, who was the chairman of the Communist Party USA. And I noticed, wow, this is how Foster interprets Columbus. This is how Zinn interprets it. Zinn presents it much more skillfully.
Academically sounding.
He uses lingo that appeals. He doesn't use the doctrine of communist terms. He presents it more in sort of the 60s lingo. He talks about the establishment, the system.
Yeah.
So he's very skillful in writing this, but essentially it's a communist interpretation of American history. It's propaganda.
It's propaganda. I want to get to, and I know we don't have a ton more time, I want to get to what we're going to do about this, but you also recount in this book how he recasts the World War II and what America's mission was. Mm-hmm. Can you just briefly tell our listeners what Zinn has been telling our children about that?
Yeah, that the good war was not a good war, that we were not fighting fascism, that we really were fascists because we were guilty of the same things that the Nazis were guilty of. There was racism here, as there was in Nazi Germany, our bombing of Dresden. He uses a figure from a Holocaust denier by the name of David Irving to claim that 100,000 had been killed in Dresden. Now, Dresden, it was a tragic thing, but that's a wildly inflated number. But he uses that in order to paint America as evil, as not being on the right side.
It's really hard to take, really hard to take. Well, you also, I'll just tell our listeners, you had a discussion about how he praises also communist leaders. After the war was over and Russia's trying to rebuild, they had a huge, damage and death, trying to rebuild. And he describes a period where Stalin is killing his own citizens and you go ahead. So what does Zinn have to say about Stalin?
Well, he does a couple places say negative things about him, but he presents the Soviet Union as basically, having won the Second World War, and that it was thriving economically, whereas the United States was wasting money on the military, and that they weren't trying to go into other countries and take them over. Actually, it was America that was imperialistic. It's like
what he says about the Eastern
down.
Bloc. Go ahead. Sorry.
Up is down. Good
Yes.
is bad. I mean, that's the topsy-turvy world of Howard Zinn. And so I kind of go into the Cold War. Of course, he thinks the Cold War was horrible. He claims that there were concentration camps set up for people like him under the McCarran Act, and I show, no, that did not happen. But he presents every effort by the Soviet Union to take over, say, Greece or any other country or Vietnam as simply an uprising by the people because they wanted communism. And of course, the United States comes in and interferes and quashes this,
lovely communist revolution.
Right, which was really true democracy, right?
Oh, my gracious. Okay, so first of all, I congratulate and commend you in this book. I love that you're exposing all this. But think of whatever this is, 2 generations of kids who've been reading this.
Right.
It's still in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have one narrow question, which is, don't you think it's odd that there weren't more teachers and administrators throughout the years who would read Zinn's book and say, wait a minute, I mean, where was the public school teacher voice or the, fighting against this book, what it teaches?
Well, education has been corrupted since the 1960s. The leftists entered it, the education colleges have been corrupted, and so a lot of teachers, even those who teach social studies, don't really get much social studies or history instruction. They get a lot of the educational theory and stuff.
Okay.
So, and a lot of people, on the conservative side and even on the liberal side, have written about Howard Zinn's inaccuracies and his conspiratorial presentation of history, but they've done it in articles. And they haven't gone through systematically and looked up where he's wrong, where he's distorting stuff. And I think it's because it's such a nasty job. I felt like Mike Rowe coming out of a septic tank or something. I had cleaned. After reading Howard Zinn, it's like, you just get this nasty, because it's lie after lie after lie. And so most legitimate historians will just, throw it on the floor, say it's not worth reading. But at the same time, it was being snuck in by leftist teachers and professors.
It's corrupting our children.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there a movement afoot to try to get public schools to eliminate this?
I am hoping to do that with my book, which focuses on the facts. I'm trying I went beyond just simply criticizing Zinn for being anti-American. He just distorts the facts, and I'm hoping that this will be used in the schools, put into the libraries in schools and the media centers and public libraries, so students can at least have a resource. So if something doesn't sound right, that they're teacher or professor is saying they can go to my book, and if they don't believe me, they can go to my sources. I have almost 1,000 footnotes
I would say
there.
you a lot of footnotes.
Yes.
Which is a great thing. The footnotes are good.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of getting it at least criticized, but ultimately we need to have it not in public schools so that the advanced history or American history advanced, what is it? What's the course?
Advanced placement, AP.
Yeah, AP history does not test to this book.
Right.
So that is a federal level issue. Try to resolve that. You have state level because you have, I'm sure within states you have the state governments being able to say to public schools, not this book. I mean, I assume they'd have that authority, or maybe it's the school boards.
That's a
it's
good
like
point.
a massive communication effort to say, everybody stop using Zinn's book.
Well, yeah, in Arkansas in 2017, Representative Kim Hendren tried to introduce a bill to ban Zinn's book from publicly funded schools. That went nowhere, and then the Zinn Education Project actually started fundraising off of it and sending Zinn's books to teachers who wanted it. In Missouri, they may be introducing a resolution against using Zinn's book. So that's one action that I would advocate for at the state level. At least make people aware of how factually wrong his book is, and no more than one would use the history book of David Irving, a Holocaust denier, in the classroom, would anyone use Zinn's book.
That's a great analogy. In the same way you wouldn't use a Holocaust denier's book, you shouldn't use this one. So we're speaking with Dr. Mary Grabar. She is the author of this book, Debunking, I love that word, by the way, Debunking Howard Zinn. And I urge you to get it. I ordered it on Amazon. You can too. And also tell your friends about it, because I actually think it really is eye-opening, helping Americans understand why so many of the young generation in America are just, in an unspoken way, so anti-American, so disdainful of the ideas of America. So you can find Dr. Grabar. She is a resident fellow at the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. Their website is THEAHI, the AHI for Alexander Hamilton Institute.org. And on Twitter, she's at Mary Grabar. And I want to just, again, commend you and thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.
Great to interview. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
We try to hit two more topics, my very fine friends, before we wrap up for the day. One is, I mentioned yesterday you would have two choices on television last night. You could either watch the Democrat debate in Las Vegas, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but I have some clips, or you could watch President Trump's rally in Phoenix. But I first want to start with telling you something even more brilliant that President Trump did, not in Phoenix, but earlier in the day. If you didn't know this, he gave a speech in Bakersfield. So dang funny. Bakersfield, California. But so you understand why it's funny, first I want to ask Matt, the extremely wonderful producer. We have a clip. I want to have him play a very short little clip. You've probably seen it all over on the internet. But it's a clip of Mike Bloomberg explaining farming. Thank goodness he can explain farming to us. Here he is, Mike Bloomberg.
Think about it. The agrarian society lasted 3,000 years, and we could teach processes. I could teach anybody, even people in this room, so no offense intended, to be a farmer. It's a process. You dig a hole, you put a seed in, you put dirt on top, add water, up comes the corn. The information economy is fundamentally different. You have to have a different skill set. You have to have a lot more gray matter.
Okay, that has been, among many things, people were piling on him last night because he did make the debate stage for the first time, the Democrat presidential debate in Las Vegas. Basically, to summarize, he's saying farmers are stupid. So President Trump, always ready, went ahead earlier in the day. He did the Phoenix rally last night, but earlier in the day, he went to Bakersfield, California. I'll tell you a very quick little story about Bakersfield. My husband grew up in a little town nearby. They're called Coalinga, California. We lived in San Diego when the kids were little. My father-in-law, my husband's dad, grew up in Coalinga, lived there his whole life. Years ago, I'm talking 30 years ago, my father-in-law was telling us about how ridiculous the environmental policies were in Washington and in California, that they were diverting necessary water from farmers that farms needed to protect, the left-handed tree frog. It wasn't really that. It was smelt fish. It was some fish. But the point was, they really just chose the preservation of the smelt fish over the ability of water to get to farmers who needed it. So President Trump went out to Bakersfield, very near Coalinga, this whole San Joaquin Valley area, went out and held a rally in which he talked about these things, including, as you'll see toward the end, he brought up some farmers who were in the audience and let them come and talk about the differences. Because what Trump basically announced was he's doing what he can at the federal level to get rid of these extreme regulations that made it impossible for the farms to have adequate water. And then he elbowed, figuratively, elbowed the California government, saying, and by the way, you guys got to get on board too. But here he is in Bakersfield. This is President Trump yesterday.
Thrilled to be here today as we take historic action on behalf of our incredible farmers and ranchers, growers, and communities throughout the Central Valley and all across the great state of California. What they're doing to your state is a disgrace. After decades of failure and delays in ensuring critical water access for the people of the state, we are determined to finally get your problem solved. The state's not doing anything to help, but hopefully they will eventually come along. Now that they're rationing water for people, but Devin has been from day one, from the day I met him. And, this all started because I was driving up, what was the highway, Devin, that we were driving? 99. Does everyone know 99? And I kept saying, Devin, why are these fields all brown and they look like desert? They look like they were starved. It's too bad you have a drought. And then I'd see little patches of the most beautiful land I've ever seen. And then I'd go to the next and I'd see acres and acres of brown, really dry, horrible looking stuff. And then I'd see a patch of the most beautiful farmland I've ever seen. I said, what's going on? It's too bad you have a drought. He said, no, we don't have a drought. They won't allow us to have water in the state of California. That's how this all started. Look what's happened to San Francisco. So sad what's happened when you see a slum where it's a slum. It's worse than a slum. There's no slum like that. What they've done to San Francisco is a crying shame. And it's something that we're going to do something about, because if they don't fix it up, clean it up, take care of the homeless, do what they have to do, but clean up their city, the federal government's going to have to step in. We're going to do it in Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Real farmer. There she is, one of them.
Thank you, President Trump. I'm proud to be a fourth-generation California farmer, married to a fellow fourth-generation California farmer. I was raised by strong parents who showed me the farming lifestyle, taught me the importance of conserving our resources and the necessity of water to grow our food.
I got to cut her off.
Also joining us is
sorry.
Matt Fisher, a local citrus farmer.
You know what, folks, there was another farmer. I got to cut off, make sure I have enough time to tell you. What he did out there was say, number one, we in Washington, we actually care that we have environmental policy preventing you from watering your own farm. So they had the almond farmer. The next guy that came up was and these people, these are real life, in their blue jeans and shirt not tucked in. These are real hometown America. This is farming America. President Trump made friends by doing that little, it was an hour rally at the most or something. Lined up a bunch of local officials who are running, praised Devin Nunes, kind of gave a little tweak about San Francisco, said if they don't clean up their streets, which he rightly described as worse than some slums in India, we'll do it for you. But this is President Trump seizing an advantage because Bloomberg mouthed off and said, that he could teach you how to farm, dig a hole, plant a seed. But what is brilliant because, where we are right now in this presidential cycle, you have Trump, the extremely wealthy, and the common man relates to him. He got blue-collar voters because he's not talking down at them. He's not berating America. He's not mocking America. He is talking about the goodness of the American culture and the people and wanting the American people to be able to have jobs, to supply their family, take care of their children, to be self-reliant participants in the American dream. This message resonates with, they call them Joe Lunchpail, whatever you want to describe them, the average Joe American. And you have on the left 2 billionaires now who are still in the race for president, 2 of them, and neither of them are even tolerable. I had another clip, but I'm going to run out of time because I want to hit one more point. But the debate last night, I shall summarize it for you. All of them stood on the stage and told voters all the great things they could do for them if you just send in all your money and everybody else's money. That was the first message. Send in your money, we'll take care of everything. But the second thing that evolved during this debate was the back and forth attacking each other. Bloomberg is in the mind of the ruling elites in the Democrat Party. He was going to save them because Joe Biden has kind of fallen apart, and he was going to be their rational centrist. You know, Biden is not an extremist, say the Democrats, but he's fallen apart. And I think he didn't even talk for the first 30 minutes. They didn't even ask him a question. But now they have Bloomberg. He's going to save them. And Bloomberg was the main person being attacked last night by the other candidates because they can see where the Democrat Party is heading. And so they were attacking him. And he has a history of making statements that don't fly too well with many Democrat voters. Some statements have come out. First of all, employed within his industry, he has women sign non-disclosure agreements. So they can't complain about how he acts. He apparently has a long history of sexism, at least saying gross things. I don't know if he's been inappropriately in his conduct, but he certainly says inappropriate things. He's being widely criticized for his support in the way he spoke about the stop and frisk policy in New York. He's being piled on as a billionaire. There was a great little clip with Elizabeth Warren saying about Bloomberg. You know, essentially she said, look, we have a billionaire in this race and he disrespects women, and she rants and she goes, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. It was a great moment. I'm just saying the Democrats are falling apart. They can see, and I have the polling, I'm going to get to it in my last little segment here, they are really in trouble. Biden is not going to get the nomination because people don't like him, and he's rambling, and actually they're a little bit worried, should he actually get the nomination, that all of the corruption with the Ukraine and Burisma will be front and center on headlines the rest of the year. So they don't want that. They've got Bernie Sanders, who I'm going to tell you is frightening them to death. Then they have Steyer, who didn't even make the stage last night. Steyer, by the way, will be on the ballot on Saturday in Las Vegas, but he couldn't be on the stage because he didn't meet their cut. Bloomberg was on the stage, and he, tried to hold his own, was getting pummeled left and right, but he isn't on the ballot on Saturday. Go figure. Democrats in a world of trouble, and it leads me to my last point I want to make about today's show. I call this Blue Wave, and why? We've been hearing from the left in America that there's going to be a blue wave. Certainly here in the great state of Texas, we're being told it's something like 10,000 people supposedly that Bloomberg hired or is going to hire and send them to Texas and send them all around, and they're going to turn Texas blue. And, so he's got his mission. He's basically been campaigning by putting ads out and spending his billions of dollars. He's another one. The core Democrat voter does not want an old white guy, a rich old white guy. And this is starting to be a stage full of rich old white guys. So the leadership is worried, the Democrat establishment is worried. But I really want to focus on today and closing out, and again next week. We keep hearing about this blue wave that is really going to happen this time, that America is loving the Democrat promises and they're loving the mission. Number one, the Democrats are frightened to death about Bernie Sanders. New poll out said 63% of Americans would not want to have to vote for a socialist president. So Democrats hear that number, and that's alarming. I mean, that includes Republicans, but still, a lot of Democrats afraid to vote for a socialist. I'll tell you, in the polling they have, the polling is just killing them. About one little funny poll. So this coming Saturday in Nevada, Saturday, February 22nd, Nevada Democrat caucus happens. Sanders is at 35 points. Biden next highest at 14. So Sanders is going to win Nevada. It's not that many delegates, but it's still, every time Sanders wins, the momentum builds. He's our guy. This is his time. The South Carolina Democrat primary comes out February 29th. In this one poll has Biden and Sanders tied. Another poll has Biden up by 2. But all these billionaires are nowhere to be seen. And still, you have Biden, who is alarming the Democrat, establishment because he can't keep his story together, can't keep his points together. And you have Sanders, who's overtly, happily, proudly a radical socialist. And he will, in fact, there was a question last night at the debate that was asking him, what are you going to do about that? Bernie Sanders, you have 63% of Americans said they never vote for socialists, to which he said, what the polls are showing? I'm winning. That's right, I'm winning. Very belligerent, very confrontational. And I'll close out today's show by saying this about where we are. The Democrat Party has got to get around to deciding what it is they're willing to say they believe in. What exactly is it? They have tried to organize America by dividing America into hyphenated groups, making political identity or your racial and ethnic identity be the deciding factor, trying to tell people because of your skin color or your national origin or your sex, you vote with us, because that's the political party we have assigned to people with your skin color or your ethnicity or your sex. And it's starting to fall apart. Hispanic support for President Trump is up since 2016. Big piece about that. Someone talking, an advisor to the Democrat Party, saying all the Democrats do when they talk to the Hispanic voters is talk about immigration and how they want more immigration. And she's saying, guys, American citizens who can vote, just because they're Hispanic, they don't necessarily want massive immigration that you're pushing. So she's trying to say, the point is Hispanic support is growing. Black support for President Trump is at least holding, and you have, Candace Owens on board, the Brexit movement. She's working that. You have the new project we talked about. We actually had Bo Snerdley on the show. Bo Snerdley, real name James Golden, who is working on his new Journey PAC. He's message that he can help bring the message to Black America of the idea that if you really want a good life, if you want to know where you should vote, where you should put your trust, it's in the Republican Party and conservative policies, including limited government and freedom and free markets in capitalism. So anyway, I think the Democrats they're having big powwows over the weekend and probably every night trying to figure out what is it we're going to say we actually stand for. Because you can't stand for a skin color. You can't stand for a gender. You can't stand for you have to stand for ideas. They're saying Sanders is too far out there. Well, who is mainstream that the American voters will like? I think they're in big trouble. I hope and think we're headed toward President Trump in 2020. And now, as we always do at the end of every show, I'll tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. To start with, we first talked about sneaky Senate amnesty, under the radar amnesty for some illegal alien workers. A big chunk of them launched in the Senate. Amnesty in general rewards lawbreakers and therefore undermines the rule of law. Piecemeal amnesty is never a good idea, almost always a political favor to a moneyed interest. It undermines broader reform of more fundamental concerns. Americans prioritize the wall, border security, ending sanctuary cities, containing benefits for legal immigrants, and enhancing respect for citizenship far above waving in a new class of amnestied workers. Representative Chip Roy is right. The Senate bill ought to be killed, and someone needs to talk to Tom Tillis, too. Second point on our show today, Democrats are flailing while Trump is connecting. Bloomberg says farmers are stupid. Well, and he's also said lots of other things, racist, sexist. He's going to get pummeled if he's the candidate. But anyway, he said farmers are stupid. Trump immediately goes out to Bakersfield, farmland country, opens up federal government water entanglements that are hurting farmers, invites farmers to share the stage and speak their mind, demonstrates respect for the farmers. Not all billionaires connect with the people. Trump connects with workers and the common man. Sanders connects with angry and disaffected people, but neither Bloomberg nor Steyer connects with the people. Voters resent the idea they can be bought by Bloomberg. Democrat voters are drawn to Sanders' authenticity, at least saying what he means, and over Bloomberg's acting, and Steyer's environmental hysterical hypocrisy is turning them off. And last, blue wave, why now? Why ever? Democrat debates are crystallizing important questions. What is the fundamental transformation they claim to want for America? For all the buzz around a blue wave, what exactly is it supposed to deliver? See San Francisco. Dems are forever condemning America, castigating Americans, demonizing and dividing people based on race, gender, economic status, and foreign favored immigrant status. What is their unifying message? What is their inspiring message? What is the message of pride in and love for America and Americans? The answer is there isn't one, and Americans know it. That's why a Trump landslide is building for 2020. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Please tune in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you